Thank you, everyone. Very nice to be here. Thank you. So what I want to talk today about is AI in the context of digital transformation. What I'm not going to talk about is technology. So I want to leave you with three things in particular. One is, what are the opportunities for AI in financial services? What are the things that you need around technology to help enable AI within a digital transformation? And then what are some of the steps that you can actually use to get going within a financial services organisation? So I guess when we think about there's four main areas that we can think of when it comes to AI as far as enabling from a digital transformation perspective. So how can we fit into customer experience? What are new models or competition that can be enabled? How do we use AI in the context of regulatory compliance? And then finally, which is probably, particularly in Australia, one that's relevant is fraud, whether it be from external, from a cyber perspective, or fraudulent internal or external from clients as well. So organisations that are doing this well are creating space for innovation within their organisations. So a couple of areas that are very much a focus. Culture, so transforming the culture of your financial services organisation to put AI at the forefront. The skills needed to enable AI effectively. And then finally, usually the toughest one in organisations is the budget to help enable that. But it's how do you enable budget in the context of an overall transformation, thinking about both data and AI through there. So some of those things that organisations are doing, particularly in the AI space, and this is very much the start of the journey. Lots of organisations are starting to think about AI. They're thinking about how can they start to enable that in their organisation. There's probably not many organisations that are very advanced through this, but very much putting their toe in the water around some of these newer technologies and how they can help from an organisation. What has to be avoided, though, is that it's not technology for technology's sake, but it's how do you link technology to a business problem and a business outcome and embed that into improving either above the line or below the line in an organisation. So some examples of things that organisations are doing in the FS space. Digital agents, so obviously chatbots, robo-advisors as some examples. In the customer space, kind of typical know your customer, cross-sell, upsell. In the context of financial services, that takes a very different slant given the risk requirement when it comes to FS and products. Although in a retail context, any sale's a good sale, within financial services you need to make sure you take into account the risk of those customers purchasing products in what you target, and also consider profitability when it comes to cross-sell and upsell around customers as well. Process automation, so RPA, which we've touched on, and then moving that the next level into intelligent automation. So how can you create process automation with some of those cognitive abilities that replace some of the decision making that's often made through certain processes, and they can be things like in the insurance space, claims processes, creation of new policies, financial product recommendations as well. And finally, financial crime prevention. So obviously there's cyber security, which is at the forefront of many organisations when you speak with risk committees, but also internal fraud, so fraud of financial advisors, fraud from providers, and also fraud from customers. So how can you better identify and manage those risk elements as part of your business? So when we think about artificial intelligence, it's not technology that's going to prevent you from realising some benefits. It's really transforming your organisation culturally. Many organisations are still struggling through more traditional data and analytics transformation and how putting data at the forefront of an organisation. This then adds the next level through that. And it's certainly not an easy challenge to shift an organisation from being traditional in the way that it looks at customers and products to moving into being a data-driven organisation, and then how they can be an AI-enabled organisation. but it is very much about embedding that within the overall culture of that organisation. The way to think about this really needs to be from what's your AI strategy and how does that fit in with your broader data and analytics strategy, and how is that aligned to your business strategy? So the other elements apart from technology, so obviously when we're looking from a strategy perspective, what's people, process, what's our operating model, what's our governance structures that need to be in place to enable AI to be at the forefront of thinking. And therefore in any transformation that occurs within an organisation, how is this a lens that's always looked at when looking to advance the business? So if we think about process, so AI can be very tactical in its nature. Moving to strategic thinking about AI, how can we look at the end-to-end process within an organisation? So how can we very much be focused on not only the front office element of an AI solution, but what does it do in flowing through to the back office? Does it actually increase process in the organisation rather than take away from it? What are the undocumented processes as well? So kind of chatbot examples that can improve customer experience can also detract from customer experience if the best customer advisors are the ones that know how to navigate around systems and around process to give the best experience for a customer. So process is fundamental from very much your first touch point to your end touch point when developing an AI solution. Also, overall, what's the service delivery model? So how do you roll out services across the organisation, and where does AI fit within that? So one of the challenges in pretty much every organisation that deals in data, which is every organisation, is around governance. And AI is no difference in this respect. An organisation that is data focused should be able to leverage their existing governance structures when it comes to AI, but I guess there's some additional considerations that need to be made when it comes to governance with AI solutions. So more traditional data and analytics is very much you develop a model, the model's coded, you apply the model, it produces an outcome. So it's a lot simpler to understand what the model's going to provide to you. AI is different in that models are trained. So in training models, one of the things that very much has to be considered is, are you introducing bias into your model? So if you train a model poorly and it is unethical, it is racist, it is sexist in the data that comes in, then it will propagate that out the other side. So governance and revisiting your AI is incredibly important. And that needs to touch on all sides of the organisation, from traditional support to core operations through to research and development as it comes out. So underpinning all that is changing the culture of the organisation to very much think of it as an imperative as far as strategy goes, and focusing on data and that driving some of the culture within the organisation. So very much linked to that, I touched on data. As I mentioned, AI models are trained. So anyone who's been around in reporting data warehousing for a long time, you kind of know the concept of you feed bad data in, you get bad data out. When thinking about data for AI, it's very much important to understand that training data set and the quality of data that you feed in through this process. So data governance at stages throughout that life cycle is incredibly important. Knowing what data you have, particularly in the context of AI, where data tends to take on more unstructured forms than structured forms. How do you understand what data exists in those unstructured forms? What are the data privacy considerations for that? Is there personally identifiable data in unstructured data that you're just not aware exists, but through using AI methods brings that to the fore? So how can you track that through all elements of your life cycle as you're gaining insight from unstructured data, using structured data within the organisation, and potentially using external data in order to train up those models, apply the models, and refine them as they come through. So data quality is one of those things that's very much important to be aware of, not only for AI obviously, but for broader analytics and reporting needs within the organisation. But AI can definitely amplify where you've got poor quality and you make poor quality decisions off that through the process. Particularly when AI seeks to automate a lot of those decision processes that were made previously, so therefore bad decisions can be made without the same rigour that's been applied previously. So unfortunately, data governance and data quality aren't something that you can easily step away from when you're looking at strategic transformation around AI for your organisation. But what else? So operating model is kind of a key element of taking your organisation from where they are to being AI focused. So one of those things is, how do you organise yourself to be able to do two things? One is make quick tactical decisions and try and fail, try and learn. So how can you do that rapidly? And secondly, how can you have some longer term AI enabled solutions that consider all elements of the process? So what you can do with AI solutions is create a bottleneck that's in a different point within your organisation. Can you rapidly assess insurance claims, but then lead to a huge amount of work that needs to be done in order to validate those or check outliers from a back office perspective? So thinking about the operationalisation of AI solutions is very, very important. That being said, you also need the ability to be able to try things and see if they work. So many organisations create a lot of AI solutions but implement very few of them, and that's okay. If they've got the innovation environment where they can rapidly prototype and rapidly learn, how can they build that knowledge into the next AI solutions that they build throughout the organisation? If we think about another element of enabling an AI organisation is skills and capabilities. So a lot of these skills are kind of common to traditional analytics type roles. There's probably more from a software engineer than you traditionally see. The other thing here is around the business input. When AI is being used to make decisions, you need to be able to mimic the best decisions in your organisation. And that's often difficult, getting the best people in your organisation involved in an AI digital transformation. You want the people that are making the best decisions of the information that's being made to be able to replicate those. Often in organisations they deprioritise that. They don't want to take their best customer-facing people away from their customers to enable this, because they think it'll detract from the productivity of the organisation. So they take people that aren't maybe the best at decision making and end up with an AI solution that's not making the best decisions through that process. So your mix of skills and capabilities is important. It's not just technology and it's not just software, but it's how you can have people like business translators as part of that process of understanding the inputs, understanding the decisions and the outputs, to then validate models and have a feedback loop that looks to improve those over time. If we think about then, so kind of what does all of that look like? So what are the best organisations doing as far as transformation from a digital perspective? So as I mentioned at the start, they've very much transformed their culture. In every initiative that they do, they're thinking about AI use cases and how it can make a difference when aligned to business strategy for the organisation. They're also understanding the broad impacts of AI, whether it be on kind of people within the organisation, customer experience, improved quality and speed. So there's a few examples up here, and I kind of won't read through each of these, but some examples in the FS sector about how you can implement solutions to address some of those four broad buckets of challenges for an organisation. In my mind, this is kind of utopia. I haven't seen this in any organisation, and it's about, as part of transforming, setting up the right framework and structure to enable this. So it won't happen quickly, but it is very much a mind shift that needs that strategic view of how all of those elements of AI, including technology, can come together. Often organisations will go and try tech. They'll create a chatbot. They'll think everyone's doing a chatbot, we better do one as well, without thinking about what are the actual impacts to the organisation, and is it actually shifting the organisation or improving. Chatbots are becoming a lot more commoditised now. They're kind of easier to do. It's thinking about, across the other dimensions of the organisations, how you can embed AI into solving some of those more challenging problems. So if we think about all of that, and particularly from a maturity perspective, so every good or probably bad consultant as well has a maturity curve, so I thought I should include one as well. So this talks about AI, so very much from foundational to approaching, aspirational and mature. So this is only in the context of AI. So a foundational organisation is one that's thinking about AI and questioning about how to apply that. So through to approaching, so looking at some elements of AI, digitisation, but kind of a bit concerned about how it's going to impact their broader organisation. Through to aspirational, where experimenting with AI, applying it in certain contexts, leading it, using it to help lead some of the business strategy as well, as far as kind of new business models, and have also achieved an element of a data culture. Through to mature, where data science and operational capability is enabled, AI would be embedded into your data and analytics programs. It would be one of the questions on every change that goes in the organisation. What does this change mean from a data and an AI perspective, and what are our opportunities to leverage those as far as the organisation? So if we round back to some particular use cases, so kind of three buckets here around customer experience, around AI empowered employees, and there's been some sessions that have talked about that, and then AI-powered insights and actions. AI does tend to bleed into analytics and predictive analytics as well, so they're not kind of mutually exclusive, and a number of the presentations have kind of touched on both of those elements. So it can't be treated as something that's completely separate, but how do you make that move from predictive analytics and data science and insight into AI to replace some of those human decisions to do things cheaper, faster or more accurately than you've done before. So your AI strategy must be aligned to your business strategy. So you should only be doing things that prove the value from a business value, not the value from a technology perspective. But how can you take an AI prism to everything that you do to think about, of all the processes and activities that go in an organisation, are there machine learning, robotics or analytics opportunities that come out of the back of that? Which is back to that cultural change. How do you put AI and data at the forefront of decisions when it comes to digital transformation? So I guess if we think about how do you get started, so many organisations kind of dive in and think about let's try something. I guess there's two ways that we're seeing organisations start their AI journey. One, as I mentioned, is a strategy, so thinking through all elements of their AI journey, so understanding what their vision is around AI, how that links to their business strategy, how that links to their technology strategy, understanding where they are as an organisation right now. So can you leap to really high AI capability? No. How do you kind of build on that and progress as an organisation by understanding your current maturity levels and where you're at. Looking at the technology, so understanding what technology do you need to enable as part of your AI future vision, linked to what technology have you got, what technology is available, and how can you enable technology that allows it to grow as technology improves and new capability exists. How can you plug that in to your existing technology landscape as well? And then finally, what's your roadmap? So how are you going to structure an AI program to show increased capability as you go through? Strategy is often kind of a bit of a dirty word. It's a fancy document that people put up on a bookshelf and never look at. The roadmap is kind of key in order to be able to show to the rest of the organisation rather than tell. So how do you demonstrate what AI can do so that you gain buy-in from the rest of the organisation and are able to affect some cultural change? AI sitting only in technology won't allow that to happen. The kind of build it and they will come generally doesn't work. How do you take the whole organisation on a journey from business right through to technology to enable some of these outcomes? And there's some examples there as well. So when it comes to kind of how do you get started, strategy's one way. And whether you call it strategy or roadmap or something similar. The other way is, can you look at a proof of concept in order to gain additional buy-in? And as I've said a number of times, this needs to be a proof of concept, not a proof of technology. So if you're just proving out the tech, that's one thing. If you're looking to bring an organisation through and show the actual benefit, how do you do a proof of concept? So there's a couple of different elements that you need from that proof of concept. So what's your hypothesis? So what are you trying to prove? What do you think could be through AI enabling a change within the organisation? And with that hypothesis, you also need to understand what your baseline is. So how do you actually measure change through an AI-enabled solution? Secondly, what's the data available? So you might have a great idea, you might have a great thought about how AI can be enabled, but without the data to support that, then you're not going to get very good outcomes from that, which kind of goes back to your data governance process, understanding what data you have within the organisation, what the quality of it is, what the privacy and security considerations of it are, and therefore how can you start to use that to unlock. And then finally, your analytics algorithms. So how can you use the AI technologies and using things that have already been created in some instances to build up your models, but then use data to train those models. So each organisation has quite a different set of data. It's important that organisations try and use their own data in order to train their models to develop outcomes. So what through this proof of concept should then provide you is analysing patterns, developing insights and predictions. So what are the outputs from your model? And then how do you translate those outputs into actions, which is back to the end-to-end process. It's great to develop insight. If you can't action that insight, then it's wasted effort. So how do you very much translate that into action? And then how do you have a feedback loop that allows for continuous improvement through that process? So implementing AI isn't a once-off activity. It's the culture of going back, learning, reapplying insights, and improving your models as you go through. Particularly as new data sources get created, as we understand more about our customers or behaviours, how do we build that into the iterative process that we go through? So I guess, in summary, trying to give a bit of a flavour of what's possible from AI in the financial services sector, what you need to think about just beyond technology, which is covered on pretty much every other session that I've been to today, focusing on the tech. But then lastly, how do you get started? And what are some practical and realistic steps in order to begin the journey for an organisation into AI? If you're not very advanced through that maturity curve, then I would say you're in the majority, not the minority, but it's starting to think about how this can be applied from an overall business outcome perspective. And that's all I had.